Can you ever have a very clear audit outcome in a case where a company pays the audit firm to give it a health check of its own? That's a question, I suppose, that many countries face when it comes to ratings agencies. For example, ratings agencies are paid by the countries they rate, and very often they get into quite intense debate as to whether or not the job is being properly done. We're joined this evening by Professor Arnold Schilder, who is the global standard setter for the audit profession. That's a simpler way of the long title.
Oh, very good.
The issue of he who pays the piper plays the tune is one that's long been contentious. You come to audit me, I'm paying the bill, I don't like the audit, I push back, you don't want to lose the audit, so maybe you'll be more malleable to my perspective on things than perhaps an objective, more cynical assessment of things. Is that still relevant?
No, that's different. I would push back as well.
You would push back as the auditor?
Yeah, of course.
But is there not pressure, particularly on young auditors, people on smaller audits, perhaps even people on some fairly major audits, to actually be a little bit more acquiescent to their clients' requirements? This shouldn't happen, but it does.
It might be a challenge at times, but that's why you need a lot of education and training and support of your colleagues, and what we're working on now, a very solid quality management approach to face the challenges rather than trying to escape. I think this profession has always been about courage and facing challenges and to stand up. And sometimes you lose that, of course, and sometimes you see people not doing that, whereas maybe they should have. But that's not a reason to say the model as such would not work. You could discuss another model, and I think over many decades people have been doing so. Nevertheless, we are still with what we hear, but we have seen some strong, let's say, government enhancements here. So who pays, etc., is not anymore mere in solid practice just management or a CFO making a deal with an auditor. It goes through a solid process where in particular the audit committee would play a big role. And I would say therefore the audit committee is the one who in the end pays on behalf of investors. And there's a lot of transparency about it. So these are important guarantees for at the same time allowing a very dynamic profession. It's amazing that in a couple of months' time there are many audit reports coming out. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment. So that's part of the model as well. Sometimes people have been arguing, well, use, let's say, the legal model for judges. Then maybe you have to wait 4 years before you get a verdict. Well, we want auditors' reports in 1 or 2 months.
Yes, I mean, and in the case of quarterly reporting, the burden is that much more onerous. Are there enough audit firms in the world? Is there enough diversity in auditing in the world? The world is dominated by the big 4 audit firms, and it's also a bone of contention, especially now with mandatory audit rotation, for example, in a world where, in the case of banking, you were the banking regulator in the Netherlands for a while, you only can be audited by the big guys. They're the only ones with the capacity to do it. I mean, that strikes me as a structural problem, perhaps, for auditing.
Oh, it is. That's why it's attracting a lot of discussion. Unfortunately, so far, there is not any realistic alternative showing up. There's currently a lot of discussion about it in the UK, of course. So there have been some suggestions, but basically trying to redistribute, as it were, clients to have a bigger share for, let's say, medium-sized firms. Well, there are plenty of arguments why that's very difficult. When I was in auditing a long time ago, auditing a multinational, at some point I had to go to the CEO and say, well, we have a problem in somewhere, a small country in the world. Our just audit firm locally is not good, so we would understand if you decide to take somebody from another network. And then the CEO became a bit mad of me and said, well, look, we as a company have to warrant global quality. You have to do that as well, so you better sort it out. So that's the key issue, that large, complex companies really want a firm that can address all of their local subsidiaries, etc.
So how does it affect the global brand then of KPMG with all that has gone wrong with KPMG? KPMG is half the size it was this time last year. It has been made complicit in this issue of state capture with the South African Revenue Service, the country's tax collection service, in terms of reports that it did on a consultancy basis. It then really messed up the audit on VBS Mutual Bank. And KPMG, being one of these top 4 global brands, its quality is undermined in South Africa. It's had scores of clients abandon it in South Africa. effectively leaving South Africa at the mercy of 3 big audit firms, because many South African firms don't want to use KPMG anymore. How do we resolve that?
You won't mind if I don't comment on
No, of course
specific
not the specifics, but the fact is we have an audit firm whose credibility is lacking.
No, but I think the profession is very well aware that it is a very serious issue, and we've never forgotten about how Arthur Andersen went down fairly fast.
That was Enron, Arthur Andersen, consulting and doing audit work.
Yeah, but
the two collided, and Enron died, and so did Arthur Andersen.
I think it was basically because it appeared that the firm itself felt guilty, and that was when they shredded some of their working files. And then I think the world concluded, here is really an issue of trust. Yeah. And that's the fundament. So if the trust is really going away, then there is a huge problem. And that's, I think, why all the firms are aware that their systems of quality management and risk management need to be very solid. And I'm sure that every firm that is in trouble will regret that a lot. Because there is indeed a risk that the public at large would say, well, all of a sudden it's gone. And certainly today's, with social media, etc., that go very fast. But that's not the same as saying there is a simple solution or so, or even a bit complex solution that would take that away. So you better have to make sure that your quality management is really up to speed.
Has the audit profession ever recovered from Arthur Andersen properly? Has that trust been restored?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that's not so much asking about the performance of firms, how are they doing, let's say, financially. I would think it is fair to say that they were on their way, but then in combination with the global financial crisis, that was a big blow to everything that had to do with trust. And whether it was banking regulators, we felt at risk as well, of course.
The ratings agencies came under fire.
Yeah. And therefore that also impacts on auditors, on lawyers. Everybody was part of this kind of assurance process to the public at large that things will be all right. They lost their confidence, they were disappointed, and that's a blow that I'm still hearing and observing that, and that's one of the reasons, of course, why we are doing our utmost to what we can contribute through the standards.
Those standards, though, are by and large will be retrospective. We know what has happened in the past, so we can put measures in place to prevent that happening again. But we don't know where the next crisis is coming from. We don't know where the next problem is coming from. We don't know where the next set of crooks are coming from. And that, it always feels as if, like regulators and everybody else in this assurance process, is trying desperately to keep up with a world that's evolving faster than the professions can.
Yeah. It's a very fair point. We realize that also as banking regulators, you're looking to the crisis behind you, what you can learn from them, Asian crisis, Russian crisis. The next crisis is always different, and you know it will come somehow, but you don't know where and how from. Okay, you have to take that in mind. Nevertheless, keep an open mind on the developments in society and in business. So if you see our core projects, it's on enhancing audit quality in a complex environment with a lot of change and dynamics. So you're, as it were, standing on your toes and looking forward, what can we incorporate? One of the results is that we're trying to be more flexible and not always doing that through a rigid standard setting process, but sometimes by more flexible guidance. And talking also these days about all the technologies and artificial intelligence. How can you stimulate the development of that? How can you benefit from in your standards work? You need to be flexible there, and otherwise you run the risk that you would be regulating the past, and that's not so much what we want.
And 20 years ago, if your child came to you and said they wanted to study accounting, they wanted to become an auditor, you would have been a very proud parent. In 2008, if your child had told you they wanted to become a banker, you might have disowned them. Nowadays, how do you feel about your kids coming to you and saying, Dad, Mum, I want to become an auditor? We'll talk about that, the attractiveness of a global profession. In flux, not in crisis necessarily. Certainly in South Africa we've had some problems with the audit profession. But how does this industry evolve to keep itself attractive to young people coming into the sector? More on that in a moment.